They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I am your host, Brittany Ming, and today we are talking to Lauren Lund. Lauren is a wife, a mother of 6, 3 regular kids and 3 fur babies, a teacher, and a writer. She is a self-proclaimed nerd who spends most of her free time reading and writing or walking outdoors where she can reflect on the aforementioned. She is currently working on her first nonfiction book and is back in school for pastoral counseling. I didn't know that, and that's really exciting.
Yes, I am. I start tomorrow.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm wishing you all the best, and I am going to be cheering you on, and I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited. It kind of ties into what I hope we talk about today. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I emailed you actually to see if you would be on the podcast because I know that we have connected in the past through our writing, but I wanted to talk about C-sections because you've had C-sections, at least one, and I've had 2. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is something we should talk about because sometimes I feel like the C-section is the plan B or sometimes C, D, E, and F. And that story, the one that didn't go how it was supposed to go, can just scoot mothers into this direction where they feel intense grief that they can't talk about, especially if the baby was quote unquote fine and mom was quote unquote fine. But what do you do with that grief? What do you do with the shift when the C-section wasn't your first idea? So I want to hear your story, and then we'll talk about this.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah. So that's a great place to start. My story starts with my first child, and I think one of my first interactions writing for you and your Mothering Beyond Expectations blog was about this whole like loss of the birth plan. And I experienced that with her as my first because I ended up having an emergency C-section. Something started to sort of appear to be wrong in week 40. And I just kind of felt like a new mom. I shouldn't be asking too many questions. I should just listen to the doctor, right? My voice doesn't really matter in this. I'm not a professional. You know, if it would have been my third, I probably would have spoken up a lot sooner. But I was leaking some amniotic fluid. And eventually I had a ultrasound to see what was going on. And I had little to no amniotic fluid left, and she was in distress. So the doctor, this was in Virginia, said, you know, let's get you into the hospital right away. You're going to have this baby today. And right away, I kind of just felt my stomach drop out. I was like, this is already not going according to my birth plan. This is not how I want, this day to start. So we went to the hospital and they tried all kinds of things to get labor going. I was induced, which brought labor on really, really quick, very painfully. I wasn't able to even have like one contraction to ease into it. It was just bam. And I had a reaction to the medicine. So I was sick and shaking and throwing up. Meanwhile, and this is kind of the stuff of nightmares, but there is hope in the end of this story. They decided to do an amnio infusion, which is basically where they put a hose up you and try to float the baby, and sort of I guess maybe stabilize or calm the baby's heart rate when there's not a lot of amniotic fluid, and that didn't work. And somewhere in this process, I remember my family was going in and out of the room and encouraging the doctor or asking the doctor, can we just do a C-section? And I'm not sure, I don't really remember much about that hospital or that doctor, but I wonder if maybe they just didn't, that's not their go-to. Maybe they wanted to like try other things first. Again, I feel like my voice in that pregnancy and that delivery was just kind of non-existent, which I regret. Looking back on that, I wish I would have spoken up more, but you live and learn. And so eventually, I think it was about 9 or 10 hours later, they agreed that it was time to do an emergency C-section because her heart rate was declining. And also, whatever kind of state I was in, I was declining as well. So we moved into sort of like a panic mode where everyone left the room and they went to plan B, like you said. And I had this moment in the room alone where everything went from sort of traumatic to maybe a little bit more calm for me spiritually, where I was just in deep, deep prayer. And I knew something was wrong with my baby. I knew that she was in distress. I could feel it in my soul. And I just started to get very concerned, and my shaking increased. Even thinking about it now, I can like feel that feeling where I just want to shake again. And so I just was praying and praying, and I had my eyes closed, and I felt the voice of God just come over me. And very clearly and loudly, I felt him tell me to not be afraid. And immediately I just stopped shaking. I felt a sense of peace. I was still scared to go into surgery, but I was ready. And so then they wheeled me in, and I was surprisingly calm. But they were working fast. Like they had given me the anesthesia and were starting in on my stomach before they even had the curtain up. Like they were moving fast. I think that part was the most traumatic for my husband, who was with me. And I think a lot of times we leave husbands out of the picture. Like the C-section is a very personal thing to the mother. Like we're getting our stomachs cut open. So how could this possibly affect the father? But I think that we need to pay more attention to them in this process as well, or the partner, that, they're there in the room and it affects them as well. And I just remember him getting very, very upset watching the emergency C-section, and Emilia was stuck. So they had to do a couple different things, but they were able to, I think, work it out where they ended up turning her a certain way and were able to push her out and get her. But there was a process, a part of that process where she was stuck a little longer than we had hoped she would be, or that we would have liked. And we heard concern in the doctor's voice. And I had a young female doctor who was very composed the whole time and professional. But when she shouted out, we need to get this baby out, and the baby's stuck, and I'm gonna have you do this and do that. And the voice that she was speaking in was very concerned and kind of yelling directions at people, that my husband dropped to his knees and was just sitting next to me. His head was by my head, and we just started praying out loud again, just really like trying to lean on our faith and call God into that situation, because we needed a miracle. And it's funny because I was talking about this with my pastor the other day, and he called C-sections a miracle. And I do think that that's true, even though it might not be the first thing I recall when talking about this situation. They are, and I'm glad that they exist. That we're not, there is more than one way to have a baby now, in order to help a mother and save a mother's life or save the baby's life. So our miracle came, and they got her out, and they put her next to my head for a moment, and I saw that she was crying, and the NICU team was there. Again, I don't, so much of it is fuzzy, but I do know they were there because of her heart rate issues. I think they wanted to make sure she was going to be okay, because she was born not breathing or something. So they sort of whisked her away within seconds. They were out of the room. And so that was really hard for me. I was just like, smushed my nose into her cheek and then she was gone. And that is one thing that I really had to come to grips with. And I'm still, it's weird how something as small as the fact that I didn't get to hold her very long, like hold her after having her, can affect me 9 years later, but it does. It comes up in weird ways. And so I didn't like that moment. So it was quite the experience. And the cherry on top was that I had a nurse that night who had no bedside manner, and something that I really feel like is important for mothers who go through any sort of experience, good or bad, is that, they have a professional nurse that, just refrains from saying snarky or mean things after they've had a baby, or who is sensitive to their fragile condition in that moment. And so she was interesting, and she belittled me for feeling sad that I didn't get to hold the baby. And I think it was about 6 hours before they brought Amelia back to me. And so that was also, besides the morphine being like physically painful not to have that, that was probably the most like emotionally painful part for me. And the most spiritually painful part was being separated from her after birth. So that was difficult. And that's something that I've spent some time working through as well, feeling guilty for that moment of separation. And I no longer feel guilty that I spoke up about it, though. I'm really glad I did. The nurse was just inappropriate to make me feel the way she did. So that whole night was pretty full of crisis and trauma. And it was really a good, I think of the word thesis, sort of like this blueprint or this like skeletal frame for how the rest of motherhood has been. Like it's full of purpose and life and miracles and beauty, but there was crisis and trauma too.
Yeah. As I was listening to you, I mean, you can see me nodding over Zoom. And I was thinking so much about how you eloquently told this story of trauma and pain. And I'm thinking about a mom who's listening right now and how she may not have ever been able to tell her story like you just told it, because that pain is preventing words from coming out. Something that feels like it can't be said or can't be written, because that pain feels like it may be drowning her. Yes. And so I just want to say thank you for saying that. And I hope that maybe you're giving permission to another mom to say it's okay to speak up about this if your beginning was traumatic and was painful. Because sometimes we have a really hard time telling our painful stories, and they get locked inside of us in a way that alters our beginning of our motherhood in such a way that we live in pain instead of living in healing. So I really appreciate that you were willing to talk about this.
Yeah, it was quite the process. I don't think, maybe even about 5 or 6 years ago, I probably would have cried. I think we have set it up on this pedestal where it's like this happy, perfect, beautiful situation that's always good. And we haven't created room for there, or allowed room for there to be this reality that it can sometimes be like a nightmare, or like a horror, like a haunted house, or crisis and trauma filled. And so then women feel trapped with these painful stories. They feel kind of trapped in that horror, like, oh, I can't tell anyone this. And I just have to smile and be happy and pretend that everything's okay. And then they start to, get lost in that pain, and maybe start spiraling out of control, just like someone else who experienced crisis and trauma in a different part of their life. And they really have nowhere to land. And I want there to be this movement where we start acknowledging more loudly that really having a baby and becoming a mother is a process that's full of trauma and crisis a lot of the times, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not a good mom or that you don't love your kids, but it's life changing. Like, so many things can go wrong, so many things can be unexpected, so many things can be hard. And I think if we allow that to be a truth that is widely accepted about motherhood, then maybe more women would start speaking up about their painful experiences and feeling more welcome to speak up and ask for help. And then maybe they would even find that space where they can land. I'm very lucky that I had people around me who were like, hey, you need to go get some help, or you should talk to someone. I have friends who listen to my story. As you know, I wrote for your blog about getting back on medication. It was super helpful for me, getting into counseling, and being a part of a church most recently. For me, getting back into a good and healthy church has been super healing. So all these things have led to me being able to speak about the whole particular pain I felt in motherhood, and to come to a new place where I feel very free to share my story. I feel like I am in certain areas, I am on the other side of that haunted house. I came out of the haunted house.
Mm-hmm. I loved how you talked about the C-section being the miracle, how someone spoke those words to you. And I'm sure you felt that way when you looked at Amelia and you say, like, she's alive and she's here and now she's growing and thriving. But you also talked about how it was a trauma. And so sometimes I think if we go through something that's incredibly difficult and it turns out okay, we just want to hold on to, like, oh, it was a miracle. Like, and that needs to be the narrative we tell. But I think there is that space, and there needs to be that space for the both and. There needs to be the space to say, this is traumatic and it was a miracle. And holding space for both of those, I think, can bring us tremendous healing. Because I think if we lean into this sometimes false positivity of, I just have to be grateful, I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful that it all turned out okay, she was healthy, I was healthy, in the end, that's all that matters. Your experience matters too, and finding healing through that experience is so important, because these experiences shape us, and they aren't just, oh, that happened, like, like, oh, that was weird, it's something.
No big deal. I just had my entire body cut in half.
It really does matter. But as I was anticipating talking to you today, I was thinking about my twins, and they were born via C-section, and it was not an emergency, it was planned. So it really was plan A. However, I have never written their birth story down. And I've thought about that a lot, because they're 14 and I have, like, written my other kids' birth stories, 3 other birth stories, like within weeks to a month of them being born. And my twins, what was hard before they were born was that they were in distress. Like, I went in to have the C-section, and one of my sons, they couldn't find a heartbeat on him. They couldn't find a heartbeat on him. And they're like, okay, we need to go in now. And I could feel him moving inside of me. So, like, I knew he was going to be okay. But even when they delivered him, the doctor came in to my hospital room after it was all said and done and said, before I lifted your son out of you, I thought he was dead, because he was completely white. My twins had twin-to-twin transfusion. So that means that because they shared a placenta, one twin was transfusing blood away from the other. So Ben was completely red and, like, swollen up like a little tick. And Micah was completely white and, like, skeletal. He was only 3 pounds, 13 ounces. You could see all of his little ribs, and he was white. So the doctor thought he was dead. And in the delivery room, they tried to intubate him twice and failed.
Oh my word.
He wasn't breathing. And, like, that felt like an eternity where we were waiting for him to cry because he was born first.
Yes.
And finally, he coughed and he cried, and they just held him up to me, and they rushed, like, so I could see him, and they rushed him out to the NICU. So now they're 14 and they're big and tall and taller than I am. And I think back to if I had gone into labor, I don't think they would have lived. I
Yeah.
think that the C-section was the miracle.
Yes.
However, I've thought, can I write this story down? Like, as a writer, can I just tell this story? And I haven't been able to do it yet. And
Yeah.
I think that working through that trauma can take a long time, because it's like facing that fear in those tenderest of moments where you're literally like in this spiritual transformation in that moment your baby's being born,
Absolutely.
and you're changing, and your baby's coming into the world, like this soul meeting moment. And then
Mhm.
there's trauma.
Yes. Isn't that wild? I really love how you described that. I might have to listen to this later and write that down. That was very poignant, Brittany. But I just think that it's otherworldly. You're right. That moment for me just felt so otherworldly. And I think that added to the disappointment feeling rather than leaning into the idea of it being a miracle. I was really, I felt like my body was messing up the moment, maybe, or that I, as a woman, was failing in that moment, that I couldn't deliver my baby. And I think that we have these like levels, these pedestals, where it's like natural delivery with a healthy baby is like the highest goal, and it's the best pedestal you could be on if you're a mother. And then a little bit further down, there's like a planned C-section, and then a little bit, and no emergency involved, no trauma involved. The baby's healthy, mom is healthy, everything's happy. We're popping champagne and it's great. And then a little bit further down is like a planned C-section with like maybe a little bit of some emergency or whatever. And then at the bottom we have like emergency C-section. All these things are going wrong, and so and I feel like society kind of sets it up like there is a more preferable situation, a more preferable way for a woman's body to behave during pregnancy. This is ideal. This is not ideal. And whether we talk about it or not, those things are there. They exist, and they subconsciously influence us when we're in that spiritual moment. And we think, wow, like this is a great moment. Like, I'm so happy my baby's being born right now, but like, this is not how I wanted things to go. I didn't even get to put on my favorite pajamas. I didn't get to put on my slippers. I forgot the champagne at home or whatever. Like, maybe during COVID, it was my husband's not here, my family's not here. And then, or maybe, our baby there's something wrong with the baby. And so they need to take the baby, like, to intubate or to check, oxygen levels. And so we're like, oh, this is supposed to be a great moment. And then they just took my baby away. So these great expectations that have been set up for us, these ideals, make for this really powerful discord in that moment where we feel like, oh, we're failing in this moment. Our bodies are failing. We didn't do a good job for our babies. Like, that's where mom guilt starts, the ever-present mom guilt. And I think when you were talking about Micah, just that moment, if I was in your shoes, I would probably think back to that and struggle and wonder, like, how could I have done a better job? And really, the truth is, you did a great job. You carried twins. Your body created those and carried those boys, and you did an amazing job. Like, there's nothing you could have done better. You did a great job. But as moms, I think we reflect in on those moments, and we're like, this otherworldly spiritual moment isn't perfectly beautiful, and so it must be my fault somehow. And we're not free to enjoy the miracle and see the miracle no matter what happens. And I really think that it's something we need to lean into more, that even if it isn't our ideal situation, that whatever we're going through, even if it's full of pain and trauma, can be a both and situation, that it can be a really hard moment, but it can also be full of joy, and it can be both, and we can feel free to go back and forth between different emotions in those times.
Yeah.
And it's normal.
Yeah. So I want to talk about, we're talking about momentary trauma, or that birth didn't go how we thought it would. And sometimes we think, okay, we're past that moment. Time to move on. even if it was hard, we bring it up. But I think that sometimes these things can last, especially when we have other children and that
Yes.
birth comes up again. Do you have a story to tell about, did you go through any other C-sections or did you have VBAC?
No, yeah, surprisingly, I had a VBAC. I didn't really plan. I think after that situation, um, I did end up getting diagnosed with postpartum PTSD, just some hypervigilance, and I had some struggles that weren't necessarily depression after that, but just different struggles that can follow an emergency C-section. So I was very hesitant to go through anything related to a C-section again. I was very open to the idea of a VBAC, but my doctor was wise and didn't let me really make a plan. And he said, let's not make a plan. The closest thing we got to a plan was if I reach my due date and I haven't gone into labor on my own, then we would do a C-section. We had the date planned, the time planned, and everything. And then I got to the night before, my second child, my son Amos, was supposed to be born. And hit like 9:15, and I had my bags packed and I was ready for a C-section the next morning. And I just was a little disappointed, and I was just praying, and I had this moment of surrender where I was like, I really am starting to see that in motherhood and in this particular channel of my life, I can't control anything. There's so much I can't control. And it was this really deeply profound, like, I really believed that with all of my heart. Like, I'm not in charge here as much as I want to be. And like a few minutes later, I started to have contractions and they were really intense. And by the time my husband realized what was going on, I think he thought I was joking at first. And I was crawling towards the door and he was like, "Where are you going?" And I told him, "I'm going to the hospital." So he drove me. And by the time we got there, I was about 9 centimeters. And a couple hours later, he was born. And it was really a beautiful moment. It was redeeming. And I think, having a planned C-section could probably have been a really great and a redeeming moment for me as well. But yeah, it was really cool to experience that. And I had all kinds of emotions and thoughts going through my head when he was born. And I definitely thought of my daughter and wished I could have had that with her. But I quickly turned to the idea, the present moment where I wanted a turkey sandwich and I was enjoying holding my son and focused on that.
Yeah, I know, because I've had 3 other children after my twins, and I did have a C-section with my daughter, and that still was a plan B for me, but it was something that I did choose. It wasn't an emergency. I had been in labor for a very long time. It was like 28 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I am done with this shit, and I
Yes.
out.
Yes.
Because I wasn't dilating, and it was a very similar situation to my son Silas, and I had a 60-hour labor with him, and I was determined to have this VBAC, and I was like, I will do this, and I did it, and it was its own type of trauma because
Yeah.
it was
Oh
so
yeah. 60 hours.
it was
Yeah, girl.
difficult. And so by the time we got to my daughter and it was like 28 and I was still like only 3 or 4 and I just was not dilating, I just had flashbacks to that, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to do something different. And I chose to have a second C-section.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very joyful.
Yeah.
Because there was no emergency. She was not in distress.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "What kind of music do you want to listen to?" And I'm like, "Let's do Hamilton." And so like,
oh yes.
we listened to Hamilton and everybody was calm, and she was born and she cried, and my husband held her, and I got to hold her like right away. There was no, "Your baby looks like is not breathing." There was no like rushing the baby to the NICU. Like, and I thought back to that first one where the fear was so present.
Yeah.
And like, I wasn't scared to have another C-section. Like, I was, but I also knew what to expect, and it was just different. And she was healthy. And I thought, I am resting in this peace that this is bringing as I reflect back on that other story and how there was an absence of peace and there was so much fear. And I think that sometimes we can heal ourselves when we reflect on how our story has changed and how we have changed. And we can almost bathe those memories in our own peace and move forward in a new way.
Yeah.
Just reflecting on your daughter afterwards and how it was different. And so I think that can almost bring a healing to us, even if we're anticipating a fearful situation, that you had so much unknown before you had Amos and you had that moment of surrender. But I'm sure you were wrestling inside yourself with a lot of.
Oh, yes, very much so. I remember in my head so clearly sitting on the edge of my bed in my room, staring at my blinds, which were closed. There was no like pretty view, but I was just paralyzed in that moment. And it was a wrestling for sure, where I just had a million things going through my head about who and when you have a life growing inside of you, it touches every part of who you were and who you are in that moment and who you're going to be. There's no, part of you that's left untouched after you have a baby. And so it really is a spiritual, an emotional process that you have to go through with every labor and delivery, every child. And it's hard. And there was just wrestling and praying and processing. And I remember just telling God, okay, this is something I struggle with as a human being. I'm not an organized person or a neat freak, but I do like to have a sense of control. And, I do like to feel like I've got, a sense of control over a situation that I can be, managing the chaos somehow. And that just was something I really had to let go of. And it was just this release inside of me where I just really said, okay. And I think it applies to more than just this baby. Like, I think I need to really know this. And God has brought me back to that several times. It's not something it clicked and I was perfect with it the rest of my life. I still struggle with that, and it's this surrendering to, okay, life, there's just so much unknown, and it is scary and it is hard, but there's nothing I can do to like make it perfect. I'm not God. I just have to let go and trust him. And it's so, so hard. But in that moment, it was just sort of like a loosening of the grip. And I took some deep breaths and I just felt this release in my spirit. And not saying that, that's the key to going to labor for other women. Just have a release in my spirit.
That's just how it happened for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was part of my story and part of my experience, part of my journey with my son. And one thing that really stuck out to me when you were just speaking too is that I'm really proud of you for deciding to have a C-section with your daughter was so much earlier. And speaking up for yourself, I just want to highlight that. I think what was missing from my first experience was this idea that I could insert my voice into the situation. It's like as a woman, we're raised as a female, we're raised to just like, we were made to have children, and we were, born to do this. So we should be grateful. We should just, put our heads down and be there and do what the doctor says. But I don't think that that's healthy for the woman. And I think it is important that you're part of the process and that your voice matters, and that you give yourself grace in those moments. And you recognize right away, this is something I don't want to be in labor 60 hours again. I maybe want to enjoy this a little bit more. And so you insert your voice and you say, I want to do the C-section. And I'm just really proud of you for doing that. I think that those moments of growth, when you see those in yourself, with each baby, things change and you grow and you learn more. And it's really cool to recognize those in yourself. And I had a moment with my most recent child, my daughter, my youngest, where I had some less than pleasant nurses. Like I said, no bedside manner. I knew that after giving birth, I'm always in sort of a vulnerable place and very emotional and tired. And so I had my husband put a note on the door that said, like, no interruptions, no nurses, no nothing. And they couldn't follow it completely. I think there were a few times they had to come in, but overall, they really left me alone. And it was wonderful. So I was able to enjoy more moments of rest and peace with my newborn. And it happened because I asked for it. And I didn't know I could ask for it until I had my third baby.
Yeah. I think that listening to your spirit, and if you have like, I'm uncomfortable, or like, I feel like I want to say something, like listen to that, because
Yeah.
that's protecting yourself, like your inner self, and saying, and when you speak up for that, you're protecting your joy too.
Yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
yeah, when I was finally like, no, I need to be done with laboring and I need to choose a C-section, like I felt really autonomous in something that felt very out of control, like a labor that was not progressing for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I was like, okay, I need to make a choice for myself and
Mm-hmm.
let other people speak around me, or, you spoke up for your own peace too in your early postpartum moments and saying, this is what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can often be the gift of trauma.
Yeah.
And I wish we could protect those moments for women without having to go through trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there is just a lot of work that needs to be done for protecting women who are going through this whole journey from start to finish, whether it's like the whole pregnancy part and how vulnerable they might be with hormones going up and down, or maybe they're a single mom, or maybe they're really sick during their pregnancy and feeling very tired and vulnerable that way. During the whole labor and delivery process, where you are just completely out of body, like it's just such a no pun intended, but just a moment pregnant with meaning. It's just so full of so much happening. And then right after, immediately after, in the months following, what I've heard others refer to as the fourth trimester, which we definitely ignore and don't acknowledge. And I mean, I didn't even hear of it. I didn't hear of the fourth trimester until after I had my third kid. So that right there shows there's a problem. I think one of the first steps to helping women in any of those three phases is just doing more of what you've created on this podcast, where we just speak our stories and tell the truth. And we don't try to act like everything was great and fine and that we loved pregnancy and it was wonderful and we love our babies and everything's perfect and it's all fine. Which we do love our babies and everything's probably going to be okay. But there's so much in between, so much up and down, and so many scary moments. And I think that the more we talk about it and share our stories and are very real about it, the more we make space for other women to join the conversation and to feel less alone and less insane, and maybe hopefully even prevent them from doing something like spiraling off into postpartum or addiction or an abuse of themselves or their children. And I think if we created and developed a healthier culture for women who were having children, that we would have less negative fallout for them and for their kids.
I completely
So
agree.
there's a lot of work to be done, I think.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know what I was writing about, but I keep coming back to this phrase that I wrote in some article, that which is hidden in darkness cannot be healed by love.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes like loving ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that speaking out, telling our stories, saying the C-section was traumatic for me,
Mm-hmm.
or not bonding with my baby immediately after birth was traumatic for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a first step to saying, I need to love myself more and acknowledge my pain and seek connection so
Mm-hmm.
that whatever that pain is inside of me can start healing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that sometimes that we hide that plan B, the things that didn't go, and we just cover it with, it was fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And in moments, I think sometimes we are fine. But when the pain comes up again, maybe with a second pregnancy or maybe even the fifth, like I
Mm-hmm.
think it's good to take that out again and say, hey, I've got more work to do. And that doesn't make me a weak person. It means I'm still alive and I'm still growing and I still can move forward. I'm not going to be stuck anymore.
That is so absolutely right. And we're just human beings. It's not good for any of us to be stuck. And I think that when we say things like, it's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine, that's a funny joke, it's a funny meme, but it doesn't fix anything. It just pushes those real moments of crisis, those real moments of trauma, those real moments that are, very significant moments in time in our lives that are full of meaning and growth and spiritual growth, emotional growth. It just pushes those moments down. And then I think sometimes it wants to come out, and it'll come out 1 year later, 9 years later, in weird ways, in different ways, and it will find its way to the surface. And I am currently in counseling, and my daughter's 9 years old. And the other day I was talking with my counselor about why I feel so exhausted and tired a lot. And I gave her a specific example, and she asked for another one and another one. And a lot of it kept tying back to how hard I try in parenting to be perfect, to compensate for what I perceive to have been my failures along the way, or maybe to just do stuff for my kids that is above and beyond, and I put pressure on myself. And I think a lot of it really does tie back to, especially with my oldest, that feeling of failing her from the very beginning, or not being able to bond with her right away. And I just really never forgave myself for that. I might have processed it a little bit. I might have grown in the way that I handled my pregnancies and my deliveries by the time I had my second and my third child. But I really never looked at that situation and told myself, like, it's okay. Like, everything, I forgive you, body. I forgive you, self. Like, it was our first baby. We did our best. And I didn't fully process that moment. And to this day, I have always wondered, like, it's some big mystery. Why do I struggle so much with my emotions around this child? And why do I struggle so much and get so exhausted by our relationship? And it's because I was holding so much down, and I had one hand, it's like I have one hand around her trying to foster this beautiful relationship. And then I have the other hand pushing down and repressing all these things from the day she was born that I still haven't dealt with fully. And so if I don't want to be stuck there, and that I think is a huge part of the counseling process, is choosing to change your mind, like change your mind. I think of just like in my relationship with God, these moments of coming back to him and changing my mind about how I feel about something and returning to him. And it's the same thing in spiritual growth as it is in emotional, where you just change your mind about the way you're handling something, and you can do that. And so it's this moment where I'm like, okay, I can change my mind about how I've gone about this. And now I want to use both hands. I have both hands around her, and really continue to delve into dealing with that kind of stuff so that I'm not stuck anymore. I choose to not be stuck anymore.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be re-listening to this and thinking about that, what you said, because I've got my own stuff with my own kids, my own trauma.
Yeah. Oh, I'm right there with you. Let's not be stuck.
Yeah. We are ending up our time here, and I've just loved this conversation a lot. I'm gonna have to have you back on, and we're gonna have to talk about so many different things. So
yes, please do. I love it. I'm very passionate about helping other moms feel less alone and less crazy. And I'd love to come back pick my brain about whatever. I love talking to you as well.
All right. So to end our time, I like to ask these 10 rapid fire questions to
Okay.
our guests. So they're just for fun. Number one, which Disney princess would you want to take out to coffee?
Can I choose not a princess? Who's the one that's a glitch?
Yes. Penelope or Vanellope. Yes.
Penelope. That's who I relate most to. Yes.
I like
the glitch.
What's one thing you must have on your nightstand?
Sparkling water.
Most people say water, but you're the first sparkling water. So I like that.
Yeah. I hate water, but I do like, I'm addicted to sparkling water.
What's your go-to treat after the kids go to bed?
Ooh, during the week, dark chocolate. And on a weekend, usually like a red wine, like a cab, or just book time, reading time
Yes.
is a treat to me. So yeah.
Name an ordinary moment that brings you great joy.
Oh, there's so many. Probably cutting a flower from my garden, or just snuggling my dogs in the morning.
Last show you binged and loved.
Ooh, what was it? Oh, Lula Rich. I knew it was something that was uneducational, but
You're like, I loved it.
I think it's just more like a multi-part documentary, so not really a show. Show would be Schitt's Creek, probably.
If you run out of this besides milk, you have to go to the store.
Sparkling water.
Sparkling water. You like
Yeah. There's cans everywhere in my house.
Who makes you laugh?
Oh, my husband.
Same. I'm like, that's why I keep you around, is because you make me laugh. Like
Yeah. And sometimes at like just the right time. He has that perfect timing.
Texting or talking?
Texting.
What are you looking forward to?
Oh gosh, I'm really looking forward to going back to school. I love being a student, and I feel like I've been really encouraged and pushed in my church lately to make more room in my life for some of the things God is teaching me and doing. And I'll have to talk more about it with you sometime. But yeah, I feel really excited to go back to school.
I'm excited for you. I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Motherhood is, finish the sentence.
Oh gosh, motherhood is wild. It's just so wild.
If you would like to follow Lauren on social media, you can find her on her personal Facebook page, Lauren Lund, as well as on Instagram under Loro Lund, and I will post that in the show notes. You will also find a link of her first publication of poetry called Reflections on Genesis, Poems of Lament. Thank you so much for being here today, Lauren. I really loved our conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.
I wish I could hug you through the screen.
Oh, me too. It's like way too long. We've connected through like writing, but I think it's been grad school since we've actually seen each other in person. Sorry, I was a little late. Today's Silas's birthday, and he requested a lemon meringue pie, and I don't know if you've ever made a lemon meringue pie, but it takes like 47 hours to make a lemon meringue pie. So
next time, buy one.
that's what I was thinking. I'm like, why am I doing this? My husband was just like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm having a hard day.